Wish you were one of those influencers with raving fans who binge on your every word, consume all your content, buy everything you have to sell, and demand even more? Then stay tuned while Authority Magazine columnist and BuzzFeed contributor Tracy Hazard shares strategies, tips, and tactics from top videocasters, podcasters, authors, and social influencers on creating that bingeable factor. Now, let's join Tracy as she explores how to rise above all the digital noise with the binge factor.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Binge Factor. I'm Tracy Hazard, and I've got Paul Higgins today from Build, Live, Give. And I love the story of how Paul and I have met here, which is ironic because he's actually already my client, but I didn't know it. So what happened was that I was on Pat Flynn's show. I was on Smart Passive Income, and I did my usual thing and gave my talk about things, and various people have reached out to me, and Paul was one of them. And he reached out to me via LinkedIn and said, I heard you on the show. I really appreciated what you said. And this was, a takeaway for me. And he just sent a nice little share and connected up with me, which I hadn't been connected with him before. So that was really great. And we were able to connect up. And when I went to check out his show, we had a little exchange. I asked him what the name of his show was. He shared it with me. And when I looked it up and saw he'd done like 225 plus episodes, I was like, you need to be on my show. And so I invited him on my show to come. And as I was this morning doing my research to interview him, I discovered that I went to his blog and I thought, this looks really familiar. Like the logo's looking familiar. The blog format's looking familiar. It looks just like what my team normally does. So I called up Tom Hazard, my partner and husband, and I said, hey, Tom, is Paul Higgins one of our clients? And he goes, he is. So this whole time, Paul didn't tell me that he was a client, and I didn't realize it because I have so many clients. It's sometimes hard to realize that there's not an overlap in them. And so anyway, he is a client, and Build, Live, Give is his show. And it's a great show, and I really enjoyed getting to know him. And I loved that he reached out to me via LinkedIn, and we met in just totally that sort of random, fortuitous way that just happens as you go through, everything you do in the podcasting world. I just love that that's exactly what happened with us here. So let me tell you a little bit more about Paul, because you're going to really be fascinated by what he's done, by his story. I mean, his show is just amazingly filled with a lot of trials and tribulations and things that he's had to overcome and push through just to do what he wanted to do. Paul Higgins is a business mentor, podcaster, and a published author who helps coaches and consultants to build online businesses to fund their lifestyles. Love that. That's the live part. He has 26 years of experience in sales and marketing, finishing up an 18-year gig at the Coca-Cola Company, leading the marketing strategy for a $70 million business unit. $700 million business unit. I just said that wrong. I skipped a zero. In 2011, he left to manage his inherited kidney condition. He has founded and sold 2 businesses and had a successful transplant from his best mate in February 2019. With his newfound energy, he loves to mentor, spend time with his teenage children, and play golf. He has a book called Build, Live, Give, and 100% of the proceeds go to the Purple House. So I'm excited to invite you to listen to Paul, and you're going to really quickly tap into his binge factor, because you're going to hear how wonderful he is at giving and doing all the things. But we don't get to the binge factor all the way till the end. But I'm going to do a few things different in this episode, and so I don't want you to miss out on it. Stay all the way tuned through the end. Thank you for listening, and check out Paul Higgins, Build, Live, Give. Paul, thanks so much for joining me. Excited to talk to you.
Yeah, the same. I'm very, very excited for this.
Build, Live, Give. Great name. It wasn't your first name, though, if I'm not wrong about the way I heard that on you have a 0.5 episode, right? So I want everyone to be aware of that. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But in your 0.5 episode, which is like your pre-number 1, you talk about the fact that you've shifted the show a few times, and the name is a shift.
Yeah.
So what name did you start with?
Yeah, so I started with Corporate Escapees.
Right. That seems interesting and exciting. And how long ago was that?
So I think I changed. So I launched it 3 years ago. And then I think I think it was late 2018, I changed it. And, corporate escapee, so it sort of followed my journey. I was a corporate executive, then went and built my own businesses, and I couldn't really find any podcasts that were ideal for me. So the classic, I went and sold my own itch, scratched my own itch. So, I launched that, and then, I was really thought about, well, I'm up to year 8 and, I'm no longer a corporate escapee. I'm actually, a business owner in my own right now. So that's when, and I heard once on a podcast, someone talk about build, live, give. And then I thought, hang on, that's me. I've
so
built a great business.
This is what you wanted to be.
Correct. And then so I quickly, Googled it, the domain was there. I'm like, done. And now my book, my podcast, my product-based company, everything's now build, live, give. So that's how I came about.
I love that. So it really came out of doing it and shifting into what was right at the time. And that's one thing I think I want everyone to hear as a lesson from you is that it's okay to make the shift. Yeah. The audience is right there with you, whether you think they are or not, that most likely that you didn't lose anyone in that process. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, no. If anything, I gained. So yeah, definitely for the better.
Absolutely. So you've done well over 250 episodes, but you have shifted it along the way and you have done this 0.5 episode. What's the point of it? Tell people why you did the 0.5.
Yeah, look, I was, I went into someone's podcast, because I'm a prolific listener. So about an hour to 2 hours a day, 2.5 times speed. So that's how I collect so many brilliant experts. Like that's how I found yourself and Tom. So, I'm constantly finding people, and I listened to a few and I just thought, it's no longer relevant. So what they were doing at the start of the show is no longer relevant. And I'm someone that will listen to every episode. I'm not saying, everyone will do that, but I love to go through and learn the journey as I go. And I thought, well, if you come into my podcast, if you've listened to episode now 250 or 247, I think is live, and you go to episode 1, it just seems so disconnected. So I thought, well, why don't you guide people? So it's just a simple episode where I just go through, this is how I started. This is me now. These are my favorite episodes. This is what the whole premise of the show is. So it just gives someone a nice, warm welcome, no different to like your LinkedIn profile where your about section should be a lovely, warm welcome. I'm like, well, my first episode wasn't a lovely, warm welcome. It was someone very nervous and didn't know what the hell they were doing.
Well, so you're a podcast binge listener in and of yourself, right? I mean, that you are the definition of a binge listener who pod fasts. And pod fast doesn't mean starving. It means you consume it at a high speed. And so you're the consummate of the ultimate binge listener. And that's what we're always looking for here on the show. How do we reach them? And you realized very early on that you probably have a pattern for how you listen too. So many binge listeners, this is a pattern that I hear again and again, is they go to your very beginning, they'll read your description, and they'll go to the first episode because they don't normally have a 0.5 somewhere along the way or anything else. So they'll go to your first episode and they'll take a listen. Now, iTunes or Apple Podcasts has a teaser, has a new feature where you can highlight a one. Thank goodness. So you can put your 0.5 up there and have that be there. And so, but not everyone has an iPhone. I don't. So not every one of us gets the benefit of that, right? But having that is a great benefit. So I guarantee you the binge listeners and podfasters on iTunes or Apple Podcasts will do that. And so they get to go there, and then they usually go to your most recent because they know and understand that a lot probably changed.
Yes.
Is that the way you do it as well when you listen?
Yeah. And often, let's say someone's got 200 podcasts, you think, well, which are the ones that they consider the podcasts that are going to benefit you, their audience, the best? So, that's the other reason I did it, so that you can actually help people get that journey. And then people can bounce around however they like. But I think that's also important because, we're all so busy. It's not as if they're going to, listen in sequence from 1 to 200.
Well, some people do, but not everybody, right? We jump around to what's worth it for us, right? Yeah. And that's sometimes hard to judge when you have names of people you've never heard before.
Spot on.
Yeah. So you've turned this into now not just a podcast, not just, exploring corporate escapism, and you've turned it into a business. It's a coaching business. Tell everyone about the business model and how it works, and when in that process did your book come?
Yeah. So my key business is, I call it mentoring coaching. It's a similar thing, but for me, it's for low seven-figure business, service-based business owners that want to get to high seven, but predominantly they've got two key things that are stopping them. One is they're doing most of the sales, and the second is they're doing most of the delivery. And I'm sure you've all, listening now, you've all heard that. Right. And
Everyone's going, nodding, going, yep, been there.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, that sounds familiar. Right. So I've got a simple 12-week program with 29 components that solves that. And so that's my one-on-one. And then I've got a group that goes through the same thing, but we've got online that supports the group. And then at the start, I've got, we call it the sales machine, which is really getting clients on LinkedIn, which for B2B service-based businesses is fantastic. Think of it as the new virtual coffee. So it used to happen in networking groups. Obviously, COVID's, fast-tracked. Now everyone's doing this. It's on Zoom and it's sped it up. So they're the key products that I have. And in 2018, I was on dialysis. I had kidney failure. I was on dialysis. And I thought, well, how can I best use this time? How can I give back, which is the give section? And that's when I thought, well, why don't I just write a book of all the things that I've learned from leaving, being a corporate director, one of the largest companies in the world, to building my own businesses, exiting one, and continuing to work while I was in a hospital bed. Why don't I write a book to do that? So it was killed time, but most importantly, it gave back to others.
I love that. So your book is your gift.
Yes.
Did you sell a lot?
No.
And you're not alone. And I laugh, but I laugh because every one of us is going, oh yeah, we all have one of those on the back shelf, right? And so, what is it about that? That's like, everyone out there who I talk to, it's like their book doesn't sell. And you know what's so interesting? So I was looking at the statistics, and the vice presidential candidate, Kamala Harris,
yes,
did $350,000 in book sales in 2018, I think, if I remember the numbers right. And so I thought about that, and I was like, she was a senator, she was prepping to run for office, and she could only generate $350,000 worth of book sales? Like, that seems awful, sad. So I thought, if someone at that level can't do it, why are we as entrepreneurs expecting that we can do that? That doesn't mean our book doesn't have value. It just means our expectations of its return maybe are a little off.
Yeah, correct. And look, for me, the book was always, if I couldn't help someone in my mentoring, but I'd already gone through and solved the challenges they were facing now, I could give them the book. And often I'll be in a call and say, look, my best advice to you is just go and read my book, because it's got the best advice I can give you, and you can, listen to the audio book, you can read it at your speed, whatever. So that's what I do. Now, I'd love to sell more, only for the fact that 100% of the proceeds go to a charity that I support.
So you wanted that to have more value. I totally understand that.
So yeah. I'd like to help them. They're the Purple House. I'd like to help them more, but it was, I to be honest, with all my health challenges, even to get a book out took everything I had, and then to market it on top of. And it was a little bit about timing, because, I nearly passed away in 2018 when I had a nephrectomy, and that, scared me enough to think, when I go through this transplant, what's life going to be? Like, I lived for 4 years not knowing what my life was really going to be. And I thought, well, if I go and put all this money behind a book, etc., and then I can't actually do anything because, I've got complications with my kidney or whatever happens. So look, it may be a bit of an excuse, Tracy, and everyone listening, I'll declare that, but it was...
I think it's a really valid one out there. Everybody's going, yeah,
it's the
Paul,
best one I had, right?
We're giving you a pass, Paul. Don't worry about that.
Well,
but this is the thing, though. In some cases, in the book in and of itself is just another form of service, just like our podcast might be at times, right? Yes. So, so give yourself a pass on that. And you don't know what it will afford you in the future. This is what I was thinking about is that maybe the new model of speaking is I come and I do a virtual event for you and you buy my book and send it to all your members.
Yes.
Who knows? That's the speaking fee of the future. And so that book may have high commerce value. We don't know.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So,
but I must admit, I know this sounds a bit obvious, but if I had the choice between doing a podcast or a book, I'd take a podcast every day of the week.
Well, that was going to be my question. So I'm so glad you said that already and just preempted that. Great. That's how, that's a lot of the reasons why the books have not left. I have 3 of them, have not left my credenza to get to publishing because I know I don't have the time to market them. So I know that that's not there for me, but it is that timeliness of the podcast that always feels like by the time I'm about ready to publish the book, it's already out of date. And that part of it as a podcast host is hard to reconcile.
Yeah. So true. And look, for me, the book, I found it difficult to constantly refer to the book, right? Yeah. Whereas a podcast, you're shining the light on the guest. And I also do an individual podcast as well, but there's 2 a week. And with LinkedIn, I can get, for some of my guests, I'd get 200,000 views to their posts on LinkedIn. So to me, that's giving enormous value, whereas the book, it is about me. So it's harder, I think, to do that. So that's the other reason why I love podcasting, because like you said, the topics are relevant. It's a lot easier to put out, but it's also a lot easier to promote, I believe, especially through LinkedIn than what a book is.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with that. So you're heavy into LinkedIn. I've heard that because you have that message on all your shows. Are you using the content differently on LinkedIn? So how are you using your podcast content on LinkedIn? I think there's a lot of people out there curious to know that.
Yeah. So the 2 shows a week. So I post 3 times a week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And on the Tuesday, it's my interview. And on the Thursday, it's my solo. And I'll just write a post specific to the podcast. And then I'll have the link to the podcast below. And, that's working incredibly well. A bad post for me might be 5,000 views. And like I said, a really good post for me is a couple of 100,000. Now, my website, I'm too embarrassed to say how many views it gets a year, but, 200,000 views to a podcast post that took you 15 minutes to write takes a fair while to get. Now, your SEO and taking my results are definitely improved since I've been using your service to get the better SEO value out of the show notes, and I think that's been incredibly beneficial. But still, 15-minute post on LinkedIn is
it's got a lot of views on there for you, so that's working really well. Now, are there any keys to how you post it, to how you frame up what you're talking about?
Yeah, so the fundamentals of a post is have an intriguing statement, right? So no different to journalists. You think about a news feed. So a view technically is just someone flicking through your news feed. So what you want to do is stop them and get them to open it. No different to an email, no different to copy anywhere else. So make sure that above the see more, that it's a very intriguing statement to get them to open more. So that's number 1. The second is tell a story. Make it enjoyable, right? So make it enjoyable. That's pretty obvious. But make sure there's plenty of white space, and I'm maximum 2 lines in a sentence. That's it, right? So give it plenty of space. Give them value. So what will they get out of? So I say this is the value you'll get from listening to this podcast. So it's very clear why they'd invest their time. Then I always have a question, right? So the algorithm with LinkedIn is comments are worth double what a like is. Right? So you want to get as many comments
are worth more.
Spot on. So what's the best way to get comments? Ask a question. So you ask a question and then have I always say a call to action, which is, thumbs up, So, if you like the post, give a thumbs up. If you'd like to connect, please do. So it's guiding people where to go next. And the last thing is the hashtags. And the hashtags, now your LinkedIn posts are actually searchable by Google. So you'll get SEO value now out of posting on LinkedIn. And 3 hashtags is what Google use. So I say 3 hashtags, 1 of your own, 4, that's it at the bottom. And the hashtags, if anyone ever wants to know what a hashtag, how many followers it's got, you just go into your search in LinkedIn, you type hashtag podcasting, and it'll tell you that there's, 7 million people that follow podcasting. So you can pick your different hashtags based on the theme of the post, but also based on, you want some large following, but you also want some smaller ones that are more specific to the content. And
because you can get buried in the big following, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes you want to be a small fish in a big pond. Sometimes you want to be the big fish.
I love that. Thank you so much for that advice. That was really thorough, and I can see why your posts are doing so well in that process. And it's not always translating though into people leaving the platform and coming to listen, and that's something we were talking about. So, how is the process of going from great circulation in LinkedIn to people reaching out and listening more and then asking for coaching? What does that flow for you?
Yeah, great question. So when someone approaches me on LinkedIn, I get my team, they basically look at who's approached, and they always ask, was it through one of the blogs? Thanks for wanting to connect. Did you find me through one of my blogs or through one of my podcast episodes? And it's amazing how often someone will say, through my podcast, through your podcast. So that's the first way to do it. Then the other thing is to the people that like and comment on the post, then you reach out to them. So you specifically put the link into the post and you say, great that you liked and commented on X post. What was the value that you gained? So once again, you're starting that conversation.
You're creating that engagement already, which we love to talk about as a sign of a community building going on.
Correct. And it's the like, know, and trust, right? So, and you're just validating that they've already made the choice to do that. And then for some, so when you do the outreach, if you've got someone comes back with a specific focus that they're doing, and you've got a podcast interview that you think really answers that question, I always say, would you be open to listening to a podcast where my guest has given specific advice on that? And if they say yes, then you can send them the podcast. So there's 3 ways there that you can link your podcast and LinkedIn together.
And you don't know how many other people are watching that engagement going if you're doing it live within your comments and your post anyway. So that's really a great way to go about doing that. That's wonderful flow through. Now, are you really getting good coaching clients though out of the podcast? How is that working for you?
Yeah, look, really good. So I basically look at 4 types of guests. So one is an icon. So someone that is, so for an example, from an Australian example, Nathan Chan. So he's the he's the CEO of Founder without the E, the R. And, he's got a million people on Instagram that follow him. He's got a very large audience. So getting him on, I get some access to his community, and his community is aligned to mine, but also it helps me get other guests on my podcast that are similar. So that's right. The icon. The brand builder is where they've got an audience that you would love to be in front of. So that's a great one. That's the second. The third is what I call a bank builder. Now that may seem a bit harsh, but it's basically people you really think you could help, and you're declaring to them that you're on the podcast, but you have got an ulterior motive. So it's not smoke and mirrors, but you're saying, look, I'd love to have you on, but prior to that, these are some things that I've seen on your website, et cetera, and I'd love to talk to you about that.
So they're the potential client that you're bringing on.
Potential clients, correct. And roughly if you can get 25% of your guests to be a prospect, and I think that helps, but also they may know people. If it's not right for them, they may know people, so there's still that referral. And then the last one is an expert, where I just bring on someone that is giving exact value to my target market that, they would find it hard to get anywhere else.
They need this help, right? Yeah, this is something I'm asking for, so why not? The audience may want it too, so that's always helpful too, is when you're doing that way.
And I have sorry, Tracy, just quick. I have a question. So when someone asks, in the podcast, it's always got, paulhigginsmentoring.com/questions, where you can ask me any questions, I reply. But there I also ask for topics. So, when someone gives me a topic that they really want covered, one of my listeners, then I'll find that expert and get them on.
So you go find them. So that's great. So you're still responding through that engagement process. I love that. So everyone, we're already tipping into our 5 tips here. So the first one is get great guests. And I love that Paul just broke that down for you into the way that he looks at his guests differently, because when you look at them differently, then it's easy to see the value in each one of them and really find the right ones that are going to be a right fit for you and a right fit for what the answers your audience is looking for as well. Paul just pointed out. So let's go to the second part of our tips, and which is, how do you increase listeners?
Yeah. So this is one I must admit that I'm struggling with the most, Tracy. And I'm roughly about 1,000 downloads a week now. Downloads and listeners, I'm not 100% sure on the split, but let's say it's close to 1-to-1. And most shows is about 100. Some more than that, but that's sort of the average. So for me, definitely LinkedIn is helping with those numbers. That is fantastic. We're also doing some work on Instagram to promote it. We're also doing some work on Facebook. But I must admit, to triple my listeners over the next 3 months, I don't have a plan for that.
You're not alone, Paul. So this is the one, every time I ask someone, if you've been listening to the show, this is the one they go like, I wish I was doing better here. You are not alone in that process. We're all looking for the secret formula. Unfortunately, it's different for every person, right? It's not a one size fits all, which is what you're finding. So you're working towards the areas at which you have the best audience already and the most influence, and then you go try a new area. So let's see if I can take what I'm doing on LinkedIn and expand it to Instagram and see if it works. Right. So the one thing that I do here, and I'm curious because I want to tie this to the tip you just gave back in it, that you have these people who are brand builders, and this was the number one initial strategy that John Lee Dumas, Pat Flynn, all of those people out there were talking about, which was to get the people you calling the brand builders as your guests, the ones who are going to share you with their audience, and their audience is a right match to you. So therefore you'll get new listeners under that process. Are you finding that in decline, that's not working as well as it used to work?
The short answer, yes. Yes, I think it is. And I think, the icons, everyone thinks, I'll get an icon on and I'll share the episode. And look, if they've already got brilliant content, they're not going to put your content before theirs, okay? Unless the interview is that good that you've asked questions. And I've had a couple of cases like that, but that's not going to give you the boost. But I think the brand builder part, it's not as effective as what it was when I started 3 years ago, I must admit. And maybe it's the way that I'm doing it. I haven't changed it enough. I don't know, but it's not. I'm finding that, look, I've certainly found that a lot of the social media is saturated now. So more important, I think, is their list sometimes than what their social media following is. And what we do now is track. So we track all the assets that everyone's put out, each of the guests. So we're actually doing better now and actually seeing, well, exactly where was it shared and how was it shared. So that's a way.
There you go. You're the first one. And I was going to have to admit, the first one of my clients who actually do what we recommend, which is to follow up and see if your guest actually posted it, see if they actually shared it. So you are doing that. That's a great way to sort of say, look, we put all the investment and time and energy into this guest. Now, if we don't just take a few minutes to follow up and double check and see if they actually shared it, put it on their website, and just send them a quick email reminding them that they were supposed to, then, you didn't capitalize on that opportunity. Good for you.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah. So our third thing is to produce like a pro. Now, please, everyone knows you're my client, which I didn't know, as I mentioned earlier. I didn't know before I started, when you first reached out to me. I had no idea when I accepted you for the show. But what do you personally do in this process that makes your show a much more professional production?
Yeah, so we have a really thorough onboarding process. So, I'll normally meet with the guest first to understand, exactly the value that they want to get out of the show, and then, how they can link it to the audience that I know well, and, can we do that? So that's one thing. But then we send the questions and we say which ones I always ask, which ones are optional. We also say that it's conversational, so they get a really good understanding for that. We remind people getting closer on exactly how the process is going to go and what's going to happen. And then there's, a website link that we've got all of this for them. And then on the show beforehand, I go through my standard questions that everyone always asks me. So I cover those off like FAQs. So they're 100% comfortable before we go live. So I find, and I always ask well and improve after every podcast. What did we do well? What could we improve you from the guest? And, sometimes it's quite embarrassing because they say, look, there's not really anything that I'd recommend. I've been on so many podcasts. Yours, one of the most professional shows I've been on, but anything that they do give, then we put back into the process.
Wonderful. So you're always continually learning. That's a sign of a professional right there. So good for you. So we talked about engagement, and you talked about the ways that which you encourage engagement through the commenting. But, a lot of people have found that they'll ask for topics and they'll do these things and they don't get answers.
Yes.
How do you keep that going on? Do you give them some kind of recognition? Like, what do you do to get them to continue to suggest you topics and ideas?
Yeah, great. So my solo shows where people have actually asked the question and they've asked for that specific topic, I always call it out. So I say, thanks to so-and-so for, providing the great question and the topic. So that's one way of rewarding them. The other one is when people come in through LinkedIn and they approach me through the podcast, then I ask them some questions there to get better. What do you like? What could we improve? So I'm trying to get more engagement there. And also my guests, if my guests love the interview, I say, well, if you love it, would you mind giving me a LinkedIn recommendation to share that love with others? So that's another way that I'm getting the engagement there. So there's some of the key ways that I do it, but it is like, I'm sure you've heard this before, but it is lonely. I bumped into someone the other day that's been listening to my podcast for 3 years. And, I'm like, you're the one, and it's funny that, you have thousands of people that listen, but very few actually contact you. So I always go out of my way. So I heard you on Pat Flynn's podcast, but I went out of my way to thank you for what you did and also what I learned out of it and what I applied. So,
and see, this is the story, right? This is the story. So he reaches out to thank me. I check out his show and say, this is a great show, and go, why don't you come on my show? Right. So you didn't ask for that, but I offered it because you reached out to me and I wanted to reward that because it doesn't happen often enough.
Yes.
So yeah, that rewarding engagement makes a big difference. And I think that's where you're hitting on something that's working for you.
Yeah, and just a quick little LinkedIn tip there. If, like, say Pat, Pat puts out some fantastic episodes. If I've genuinely learned, what I'll do is actually reference Pat in the link, but what I'll do is say, this is exactly what I learned, so you can learn the same thing, and this is what I applied, and this was the result. So I'll do a little post on that. But that's also bringing Pat's audience also to engage. Because
you're tagging him, he's going to see it too.
Yeah. So that's something you can do for any podcast that you've listened to. And sometimes people do that of mine. And as a podcaster, it's a great thing to get back when someone's shown you what they've taken and learned and the result they've got out of your podcast.
Wonderful. Look at all these great LinkedIn tips we've all gotten here today. And you mentioned one that I really love, LinkedIn recommendations. I'm a big fan of. I write recommendations to people all the time because they don't always ask for them, and they really should. But giving you a recommendation for being a great host, that's a really nice thing to do for someone that you just had a great time with and who gave to you some publicity and you're giving them just a little shout out that says, they asked great questions, or whatever it is that you want to say about them. Great way to go about doing that. And why not? If you need to build that up in your LinkedIn profile, go and ask for it.
Yeah.
That's a good plan. Wonderful. Well, the last one of our tips is what's the best way to monetize your show? And, this is a struggle for a lot of people, but what have you found to be that sort of path to the coaching client monetization? What does it look like?
Yeah. So like I said, I always declare that, I would love to talk to you. I'd like, if they tell me what their key focus is, and I always ask them, have you got anyone helping you with that? And they say, no, I'm really at a dead end. I'd say, look, I exactly help people like you with that. So let's do the podcast interview, but I'd separately like to talk to you about that. So I find that, so it's all nice and transparent, and then that really works well to then go through my, the discovery call, investment call, etc. So that's.
So you set up the expectation, then that's with the type of client or the type of guest you refer to as your bank builder, right? The ones where their expectation is yes, of course I'm going to give to you on the show, but I'm also looking to have a good conversation with you because I think we're well matched here. Correct.
So in this exploratory, if I know I can genuinely help them, then I'll say that. And that's the pre-meeting for the podcast. The other thing is that I have a fantastic assessment. So it's paulhigginsmentoring.com/assessment, which is 15 questions, 3 minutes, and it works out if you're going to have a high or a low seven-figure big business in 2021. I always talk about that in my podcast. So that's self-promoting, which is,
but they're self-assessing at the same time, and that works out as well. So they benefit too.
Yeah. So there's that. And then I've also got a sponsor as well. So I use Dub, which is a fantastic sales and marketing video platform. And I use that for all my LinkedIn. So I always give a specific example. So it's a live ad, but it's really me talking about specifically how I've used that platform each time. So, that's the other way I'm on.
Let's do a little bit here because I'm not familiar with Dub. And so I'd love to know a little bit more about it. And what we'll do is we're going to put your affiliate link in the post at the Binge Factor for Dub so that they know that they heard you. Not me, right? So, because that's not important for me. So tell us a little bit how it works and how you use it.
Yeah. So, the overall thing is that, everyone gets bombarded on LinkedIn with text messages and you don't know anything about them, right? And we all get them. And I always say to people, if you don't like them, guess what? The people that you're sending the exact same message doesn't like it. So let's change the game, right? So what I always do is I send a connection request saying, I love connecting with high-performing business owners. I can see you're one. Would you be open to connecting? P.S. I will send you a personal video based on you connecting. Right. So as soon as they do connect, then I send them a video. And the video is about a minute long. And I basically say, great to connect. This is the reason why I've reached out, et cetera, et cetera. So it's always just building a relationship. And then I say at the end, if you'd like to have a chat, there's a 30-minute booking link below. Also, I've looked at your profile, looked at some of your posts, etc. And, I think these tips would help you, but it's completely optional. But if you go, there's some videos below. Always watch them at 2 times speed because I talk too slow. And, they're there for you. So, that's in Dub. And then when they've viewed it, so I can track all the analytics of how many times they've viewed it, how long they've viewed it for. So my team keep track of all of that. And
that's working within LinkedIn messaging, by the way. So that's what you're talking about, is you're sending that video through the messaging app.
Actually, no.
Oh.
So what I'm doing, it's a really good point. Thanks for mentioning. What I'm doing is using the contact information email they've got, and I'm sending it to that.
Oh, so you're sending it directly via email. Got it. Yeah.
Correct. Because I always say that, and it's showing my age, I suppose, that, finding a LinkedIn message is a little bit like finding a golden wrapper in a, Willy Wonka bar. Like, there's so many of them. It's so hard. The platform's not fantastic. Get them on email. Then the other thing on email, you can track through your sales CRM when they've opened it, how many times they've opened it, et cetera. So you've got all that data then to go and have what I call hot potato conversations. So that's why Dub is brilliant. And Dub has got a little Chrome extension that's it's on your email. So all you do is just launch your email, put in their email address. You just hit the little extension. It will bring up all the videos that you've got. You select the one that you want to put in, and it'll automatically cut the video in to be automatically played by them.
I love it. That's great. Well, there you go. New tool and new tips out here on the Binge Factor. So wonderful. I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah,
Now,
and it's DUBB.
DUBB. Okay, good. I was going to ask you that next because I was like, I hope I'm spelling it right here. Well, wonderful. Well, we'll have the links to it in the blog post for this episode, so you'll easily be able to find that and connect through Paul's link and help him out a little bit with that monetization side with his sponsor. So why not? You can increase traffic from all over the place. So you started doing solo shows. You weren't doing them always from the beginning, but you started doing more of them. Did that come from your audience?
Look, it came, to the honest, it came from my members in my community, but it also came from someone who we were in, I think, do you know Tina Dietz?
Tina Dietz, yeah.
Yeah. So she also said, Paul, look, you're bringing shining the spotlight on your interviewee, but what about you? Like, you don't talk a lot about you. And I'm like, okay, so I'll bring a little bit more of that into the interview as more of a conversation. So I get that. But then I thought, okay, what I'll do is just a 5 or 10 minute show that is specific to a topic that I can help people with. It's normally what I've helped my mentorees with. I then do that. And, it's really enjoyable. The thing that I must say, Tracy, I was spending too much time doing it. So I was actually writing it out.
Oh, no.
And it was just, way too much time. So now it's just a couple of bullet points. I just talk to those, more conversational, 10 minutes max, around 5 minutes, and that's it.
I love that. That's much better. Yay. But I think that the interesting thing is when I went through your show catalog and I spot check, and this is how I research every new podcaster who comes across here on the Binge Factor, is that I listen to your first episode, or in your case, your 0.5, and I listen to your most recent one. And then I'll spot pick in the middle anyone I happen to maybe know, or that way I don't have to listen as much to them and I can listen to you. That's why I do that. So like, I know you interviewed Nathan Hirsch, and Nathan's a friend of mine, and I know a lot about him and his business. So I could kind of skip through what he was saying and skip to the types of questions you were asking and learn more about how you operate your show. So that's my process, and that's how I do it. And I definitely listen to everybody on double speed. So, that's just because I don't have enough time to get through all the podcasts I need to get through in time. So in doing that, though, what I really found was that, in your particular case, I think that the solo shows really are honing in on a better audience for you, in a way that maybe because of your guesting strategy of them being a little bit, spread out in their purpose, they're not as focused on the audience as much in a couple of cases. And so the clear thread through them is not there. So by kind of getting this tied in and doing them throughout your month, you're really pulling it back into how you help people the most. So I'm curious to see, how long have you been doing the solo episodes now?
I'd have to say probably maybe 8 months.
Maybe. So most of the year. I'd be curious for you to start taking a look at the episode differences.
Yes.
Because you might be starting to see that they're trending up on those particular episodes, and that means that your regular listeners, the ones who've been with you the longest, aren't skipping them. They're making sure they don't miss them, because some of us get really behind on our podcasts. I'm sure you do as well. Like, you're like, I really would love to listen to all of Pat Flynn's show, but I don't have enough time. So you when you spot and you start to skip, yes, but you're now not skipping the ones with your particular content and topic, that's really powerful there. Because that says that you're really serving a membership community and a growth factor for what you're doing. And that's a good sign of future monetization growing.
Brilliant.
Yeah. So what's been the biggest challenge when you started it? And what do you think is your biggest challenge now?
I think when I started it, and I suppose that went into my health journey, was just being consistent, So, I never knew when I was going to go into hospital. I never knew when the next test was going to come, etc. So I really got good at batching and making sure that I always had, 20 shows at least in the can at any particular time. So no matter what happened with my health. So one thing I'm really proud of was, I've never missed a week. no matter what's happened.
Wow.
I've never missed a week of releasing the podcast. And I've got to thank my team for that as well. My team have been absolutely outstanding in helping that make that happen. And I think also the pressure of the show notes, that was a huge weight off my shoulder of, here I've got to go write the show notes after, because I love the interview part, but the show note part was just a killer for me. So that's definitely made a big difference. I think the biggest thing now is just, how can I get more people to listen, for the point that I want them to learn from the things that I'm constantly iterating on. So whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's sales, or building high-performing teams, whether there's experts that can definitely help them solve a problem. It's just, the biggest struggle for me at the moment is sort of hit a ceiling of, let's say, 4,000 to 5,000 views, listens a month or downloads a month. How do I get that to 10? How do I get to 30?
Well, this is the thing. I'm going to do something a little bit different here, but right before I do, I'm going to hit on your binge factor, but I'm going to do my close with you on air with me. Yes. And I don't normally do that. And the reason is because you are a client. So it's like coaching at the same time. And I want you to hear it now. So I'm going to do that, but let's hit that last thing, your binge factor. So you're a big binge listener. You know what binge listeners are. So what do you think is your binge factor?
Look, I think my binge factor is, it's my authenticity and practical advice. Like for me, when you listen to my solo episode, I want you to be able to take 3 steps that are going to make a difference to your business. I think that's, for my solo shows, that's the key thing that I really want to have that is different. For the interviews, it is, once again, it's that authenticity of people that have been where you might want to be, right? So they're not that far in front of you that you can't relate to them, but you can actually listen to something and say, okay, now I can actually go and do something with it. So the way that I always look at it is, how many things are people going to put down or write down from my podcasts? And that's what I want them to take away, versus being, I suppose, I listen to a lot of podcasts and I think that's great, but the story is great, but what am I going to do with that?
What am I going to do with that? Yeah. This is the thing. You're the first one in a really, really long time who's gotten their binge factor pretty close to right on exactly what I was going to say. So, and that's a sign because you are a listener first. And so few podcasters that I talk to are listeners. And there's a clear distinction between those that listen and those that don't. And because you listen, you more quickly identified it. And so it is your ability to do takeaways, to give something actionable. And even right here on the show, I always have a little side section of my notepad. And so it's really messy, guys, for those of you who see this, but I mean, I always put the guest name at the top and their podcast name, just in case brain just dies right there and I can't remember what it is. But beyond that, there's nothing on the paper when I start, unless I know specifically I want to have a question. And so the only thing I put on this piece of paper with you was 0.5 EP, so that I would know to talk to you about the 0.5, right? That was it. The rest of it I leave to make little notes. And some of it is my closing notes of what I'm going to say at the end. And some of it is the next question I want to ask when you're done. And then sometimes I put a big asterisk, and that's what's in the middle of the page, is that there's an asterisk that it says, in this case, it says Tracy's Faves. Because it was a great idea that you gave. You gave me a takeaway right here on the show of something that I could do, which means that you gave that to my audience as well. So you're giving takeaways at all points, and you're making sure that whether it's your solo show, your interview show, or you being interviewed by somebody else, you're constantly giving actionable takeaways. And that's not enough shows are like that. And so it's a right match to your audience. Yes. That's why you're bingeable. Yes. But it may also be, and this is sort of a little bit on what I'm going to say to you in closing, Paul, is that it may also be why you're not a right fit for a very large audience, and that's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Because if you're attracting action takers, then you're going to have a higher percentage of your audience or your guests who take action, who take you up on your offer for coaching, on your offer for mentorship, on your opportunities. So we don't need a giant audience. We just need a good percentage of that action taking audience. And so that's something that we've been looking at here, is identifying how do we get straight to the prospects and skip the leads. Yes. That sounds weird to a lot of people out there, but it is getting straight into attracting in and nurturing the characteristics of our ideal prospect. And you're actually doing that with your show. So now, how do we make sure that more of those people find you? Because you got to have leads somewhere, right? So, because you don't know that they're all out there looking for you.
Yes, so true.
Yeah, so true. Well, Paul, your show, great. Build, live, give. So I'm going to give back to you right now, Paul. And my give back to you is a little bit of mentorship on what I think that others should take away from this show, from what you've said, and what you could build on. So 2 things besides the one that I just gave you, which was the idea of saying, where's that prospect and how can I just do more that's perfect for that prospect, is to switch up our mindset on a know, like, and trust model. And instead look at it as a trust, like, no.
Right.
They're finding you. They're already listening to you. So they actually do already trust you. And we have a higher trust in podcast hosting. Why? Because you can't push and force me to subscribe. Yes. I've chosen to subscribe. So there's already a higher trust factor if I've hit that subscribe button, because I know you can't get my email. You can't find me that way. Apple doesn't let you. So, or whoever you're using, right? They don't let you. So I have a higher degree of opportunity to trust you because there's the benevolence part is already taken care of. You're obviously out there giving me a show. So I already naturally want to start to reward that. Now, if they stick around and are binge listening, they like you. They wouldn't skip you if they didn't like you. I mean, they just skip it. They'd move on, they'd unsubscribe, and they'd move on to somebody else. They're not skipping you. So they like you already. So we're moving through that process. So now it says, how do I get them to want to know me and reach out to me instead of me pushing to get to know them? So how do we do that in that opposite model? And let's take a look at that piece tightly. And what can you do there? If you flip that thinking around, now you only have one thing you have to actually concentrate on and work on. What does that look like for yourself? And I think that that's the key for your future growth, because if you tie those 2 things, the action takers that you want, business builders, they're already in the right world or they wouldn't have found you. And then tying that to, all I have to do is nurture that no section and get them to do the outreach. That's great. And then the last idea I have for you and for the audience is that there's so much power going on LinkedIn right now that people are trying and doing badly. Yeah, I get asked for virtual coffee every 5 minutes. And I'm telling you right now, I've probably got 25 in my inbox that I just skipped over and didn't read. Why? Because I have a business that I'm building and I'm very, very busy building it. To have 5 minutes for virtual coffee is not possible. No. So how do we instead find other ways to do that? And your LinkedIn posts are an excellent way to do that, because that's my learning process. It's actually kind of it's my news feed in the morning. Yes. So I'm flipping through that. I'm reading people's posts. I'm checking people out. The people that I appreciate what they post all the time, I actually go and check them out, because sometimes they don't always show up in your feed. Go see the last article you posted. Go see what it was. There's a handful of those people that I go back to and check again and again. Yes. But what about LinkedIn Live? Your solo shows would make great LinkedIn Lives. And nowadays, I hear it's a little bit easier to get in the process, especially if you've already been posting videos for a while, that all you have to do is apply. Now, they don't always accept everybody, and it is a curated system through LinkedIn. But if you're regularly posting videos, and if your regular posts are getting the circulation like yours are, it shouldn't be as difficult for you to get a LinkedIn Live opportunity. I think that might be the fastest path for you to grow, because it's growing in an area of which you already do well. and you don't have to go out and learn a whole new platform, a whole new channel, right?
Yeah, that's a brilliant idea. And I have requests.
You put in a request for it. Yeah, good.
Yeah,
good.
But I'll revisit. Yeah, that's great.
Revisit it again, because I had to apply and then you didn't hear for a really long time, and someone told me just go and apply again. And so keep applying. And then what I also heard from someone is if you post consistently videos under, like your short ones, I mean, they're 5 minutes, do like under 10 minutes for sure, but do 3 to 5 minute videos. And if you post them consistently for a month, they look at that favorably when your application goes up for review. So you may want to start doing it and then apply.
Yes. Yeah. Excellent. And just one thing that you said about, those virtual coffee meetings, at the end of all of my personalized videos, I always say, if this is not the right time for you, no problem at all. Completely understand. Just let me know.
Yeah.
So
you're still letting them off the hook, and that's good. Yeah. But it is the people who are sometimes the busiest that are busy for the wrong reasons. So those are the people you do want to meet, but the approach might be to find them where they're at, where they're looking, where they're already using their time, and just be inserted in that process. That's why I'm suggesting the LinkedIn for you in the video side of that, because if Dub is working for you over here, like maybe I'll start to feel like you're just talking to me straight in my feed. Yeah. And then the coffee seems like I already know you. I already like you. I'm already ready. And now I just want to get to know you. I'm happy to take you up on your coffee opportunity. So Paul, thank you so much for coming on the show. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I hope this audience got actionable items on how to build, live, and give just like Paul Higgins. Thank you so much for being on the show, and thank you for giving to our audience here.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. And if anyone's got any questions, anything I can help with on the build from the show, please reach out.
And of course, you'll be able to find Paul at the blog post for this episode at thebingefactor.com. Thanks everyone for listening. I'm Tracy Hazard, and we'll be back next time with another Binge Factor.
You've been listening to the Binge Factor podcast. For more information on podcasting and videocasting success tips and tactics, please go to thebingefactor.com. And be sure to listen to our other show for podcasters called Feed Your Brand. If you'd like to be interviewed on this show, as well as featured in Tracy's column, please go to thebingefactor.com/guest and apply.